We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are really all melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm a partnerships manager here at AllVoices. I'm excited to welcome our next guest, Brittany Blumenthal. She is the head of people at Holler. Hi, Brittany. How's it going?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. If you want to start off by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, including your pronouns and what is like anything that has recently brought you joy.
Sure. I'm Brittany Blumenthal. I manage the people function at Holler. We are a conversational media company that is focused on really creation and delivery of content within messaging platforms. So trying to make messaging more effective and engaging for the audience. I have been in the people and talent world for about 10 years now. Really enjoy, building and scaling the people department. That's what brings me a lot of joy. But what has recently brought me joy is making a packing list for my first post-pandemic trip.
Yay,
That
that's
is like a
exciting.
very exciting thing for me right now.
Where are you going?
I'm actually going to Texas to see my family. So we haven't been able to do that. And I have a almost 8-month-old son that is going to meet everyone. So we're really excited.
That's great. That's very much exciting and would bring me joy as well.
Yeah.
You
And
mentioned
packing with a newborn is different too.
yeah, I can only imagine just X amount of more things to bring just in case.
Yeah, exactly.
What inspired you to get into the people space? You said you had 10 years of experience just in people and talent. How has your career really led up until this point at Holler?
Yeah, so I got started in recruiting. Right out of college, I joined a recruiting agency and really learned everything there. But I think and moving, I was in an agency and then I went in-house. Once I was in-house, then I kind of transitioned over into the people world. Was always just really interested in how to really make employees more engaged, and really all of the craziness that comes with the people function. My husband loves to tell people this, but I'm a rule follower at heart. So I think that it was just a really good fit. When I moved into the startup world, I'm now in my second startup, where I was the first HR person hired. It really kind of was exciting and opened my mind to all of the possibilities that there are in the people function. I think it's just such an interesting role and function that touches really every part of the organization. So it's really exciting to be able to scale a function, and especially, it's just so different at different companies that you're at. I really like that there's not really a playbook for how to do something right. You've really got to get in and understand the culture and the values and where the company is going to be able to create the right scalability for the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of scalability, hiring, and just, HR and just people in general, really touching every function of the community, and employee engagement. It's a really interesting time to be at Holler because you just received Series B funding, which is exciting. Congrats. How do you think about really scaling your company culture as you continue to grow and hire new people into the fold of your company culture?
Yeah, so raising money is always really exciting for people on the leadership team in general. I was, once we raised that money, I was quick to ask for things that have been on my mind for a while. I say this a lot, but for a while, and while we were trying to raise this money in the middle of a pandemic and really uncertain times, our team has had to do a lot with a little. So it was exciting to move to doing a lot with a little to a lot with the medium amount. But yeah, we really started looking at management training, leadership development, things like that. We have a really strong leadership team that I'm really proud to work with, that we've been able to kind of build internal training for up and coming managers off of the expertise from our leadership team, but excited to bring them some external opportunities as well. We also, another thing that we did is, as soon as this was done, is we have a Slack channel called Ladies of Holler. And it's a Slack group for the women in the company just to share articles or trainings or anything that's useful. And one of the things that we've been doing is, I'm sure we'll get into it in a little bit, but our diversity strategy and inclusiveness, we did a lot of kind of like an analysis on what benefits we were offering. And one thing that came up was this concept that I think a lot of companies are starting to do, which is offer fertility benefits at Holler.
That's great.
So yeah, so that was something I was excited to kind of like jump into. But I also have, read interesting articles of other companies that were offering this, and employees like kind of perceiving it as, they don't actually want people to have families. They want people to
Yeah.
delay that. So I spoke to our Slack group, and everyone was like, no, we, like message it correctly. Like, this is really important. It's great for a lot of reasons, but really want to have like inclusive benefits for everyone. And the company that we're going to partner with has a really big program for LGBTQ plus family building. And so it's a benefit that I'd been wanting to offer for a while, and post Series B, that was the right time to do it. So we're excited to offer that again.
I think that's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people are excited about it. And then other things that we're starting to do from a culture perspective is starting to think about events again. So we're about to launch a survey, but about readiness to attend in-person events and things like that. Most of our team is in the tri-state area. And we just did an engagement survey, and a lot of the feedback there was like, we miss events. And I think it's the timing with, things starting to open back up and the CDC guidelines being relaxed and things like that. So we're excited to get to work kind of creating a strategy to safely and comfortably offer social events again. But more than anything else, I would say our recruiting function has been very hard at work, kind of like building the recruiting and the interview process that's focused in the right areas, sourcing diverse talent, ensuring our interview process is inclusive of all applicants. And we've really been focused a lot pre-Series B of putting that work in, so that post-Series B, we're hiring about 40 people this year. We have the infrastructure to do so, and to do so the way that we want to.
Yeah, 40 people is a lot, and just hiring new folks into the fold during this time. And there's a lot going on with inclusive benefits and possibly like in-person or virtual events. Have you changed or improved your onboarding process for new folks who are going to join Holler?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think was so interesting about this whole remote working thing for, what are we at, like almost a year and a half now,
Yeah.
is we've really been able to use the lessons that we've learned on onboarding and the challenges that come with onboarding people remotely to make changes to our process that I think will be more scalable. So, I think historically a lot of companies and maybe the more progressive ones were already doing this, but I know we at Holler were primarily hiring people in the tri-state area. And so we had an in-person onboarding process. I wouldn't even say it was that robust. We're, still a pretty young company, but definitely wasn't really taking into consideration remote hires. So we did have to revamp the whole thing and really think about how we make that experience an experience. And I can't help but think of all of the people, we don't have that many at Holler that are remote, but there are at least 3 or 4 people who have gone through a really not great onboarding experience because they were hired remotely. So I think that's something that we can really take away from this time. But we actually started using this audio learning platform called Spoken to supplement our process. So we've been able to get other, like a variety of leaders in the organization, regardless of location, seniority, to really share stories and insights and things about their team with all of our new hires consistently. So we do like talks, fireside chats. We've made some policy changes during COVID that I've recorded, and now all of our new hires are able to listen to that. So it's been a really unique way to, we still have in-person meetings or virtual in-person meetings, I guess, for new hires, but we've also really been able to create this library of content to supplement that. So it's kind of this idea that just because you weren't here when we had this event doesn't mean that you can't get the same information. So that's been fun to see, and I think, and we're honestly just about to launch it, so it'll be exciting to see the feedback there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having that accessibility to resources and content and like past events as well is super helpful for new hires, just to understand the culture too. So I think that's
Yeah.
great. I know during these conversations, a lot of times the topic of burnout comes off because people are not separating their personal lives from their professional lives. We're in our homes now, so it's harder to differentiate that line between like when does work end and when does it really begin. How you proactively think about preventing burnout on your team?
Yeah, so it's a very big, big topic in the people space right now, and we've been talking about it a lot, and internally too. So, I'd say as a company who just closed our Series B, like you mentioned, we've been in planning mode for months,
Yeah.
and since the close, we've really shifted full speed execution. So this is something I've thought a lot about, knowing that this day would come, and really trying to encourage people to take time off and uh, for themselves, and I think that was, I'll just be perfectly honest. We had this conversation that May of 2020 as a leadership team, and we said, we're really worried people aren't going to take time off. That was when we thought, okay, maybe the world will reopen in the fall, and we were concerned that we were then going to have, the entire team trying to take. We get 20 days of vacation and 9 sick days a year. We're like, we can't have 20 people or everybody taking 20 days at that time. So we sent out some emails and we were like, take these mental health days, they're good for you, and nobody really did it. So towards the end of last year, when we realized this thing wasn't going away and we were probably dealing with another year of it, we started talking more seriously, and we changed we started limiting our rollover. So we used to be able to roll over essentially as much time as you wanted. And we said, okay, starting at the end of this year, so 2021, you can only roll over 5 days. And we, tried to message that, we want you to take time. Here's some things that you can do to take time off even when you can't travel. Like, we try to do all that. And it wasn't received well across the org necessarily. Like, I think a lot of people felt like we were taking something away. And so we actually jumped into that, what I mentioned previously, like that's the spoken platform. And I just talked about the entire process, like, from point A when it first came up, all of the different things we evaluated, all the reasons why we did what we did. And I think it was really good for people to hear the kind of like inside perspective, and really listen to all of the different things that we evaluated. We looked at offering unlimited paid time off, and through all the research that I could find, it was actually showing that people take less time off. So we're
Yeah.
really, so we talked about all that stuff. And I think for, those things seem very, like, of course, statements to me, but, I have to remember that that's not the case for other people who don't live in this HR space. So that was a really good thing to do. But we are still watching it. Like I mentioned, our recent engagement survey just showed that we have potential to be headed in the direction of burnout. And one of the questions that employees were responding to were that we saw a decline in is that they have less energy for activities after work.
Yes.
So that's something we've been talking about, the leadership team, and I don't think it's going to end until we're in some sort of normalcy again, whatever that normalcy will look like
Yeah.
is to be determined. But yeah, it's a real problem, and I think a lot of companies are trying to get creative with it without overwhelming people, forcing them to take time and forcing them to attend events that are not work related. Like, we've really been trying to walk that line for months now.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point though, when folks can't travel and take time to do an activity or to spend time with people outside of their household. It's like, what do you do with those mental health days? And just, it sounds like you're thinking really creatively and dynamically about a strategy moving forward, and using the platform that you mentioned as well, just to explain the why behind decision making. Again, that two-way communication with employees is super important as well. I know you mentioned earlier a little bit about Holler's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, which is super important to understand the why behind that as well. And in our previous conversation, you worked really closely with the CEO and founder of Holler, Travis, to really develop out that strategy and be super intentional, and how his identity as a Black founder in tech really influenced that as well. Can you tell us a little bit more behind that, and also what DIB Sources is as well?
Yeah. So this has been a really exciting project that I've been working on for, I guess, a year now. So, when we sat down after a lot of like the racial issues were happening in the US, and there was really like a call for a change. I myself, Travis, who's our CEO, who you mentioned is a Black male tech founder, and our chief marketing officer, Sarah, we sat down and we started talking about, what are we going to do? Like, we have a unique perspective here. There are, Travis is one of very few Black tech founders in the space, and we knew immediately that we wanted to use his voice, but we didn't know how to use his voice necessarily. Like, what we knew is that the system wasn't working. Whatever we're doing now, or whatever, however diversity has been approached in corporations before, is clearly not working because we're not seeing very much change. So we try to be really honest about that from the beginning. Like, we don't, yes, we want to use Travis, and yes, we want to try to help him really drive change in the space, but we don't know how to do that. Like, we don't have the answers. So, many weeks of discussion, we came up with this idea of launching DibSource, and it's diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And the idea, it's a website, it's dibsource.com, and the idea there is for us to share what we're doing and be really honest about it. Like, we talk about a diversity strategy or DEI strategy shouldn't be any secret sauce. Like, if something's working for you, please share it. If something's not working for you, please share it. Like,
Right.
companies all over, and it's been in all of my people communities and things like that, HR communities, this has been something that kept coming up. Like, we're trying this, we're just trying this, we're going to see how it goes.
Right.
And so that's kind of what we did. Is we said, we have the platform is an open source project. People can, different companies can go in and share ideas that they've had, articles they've written, how they're approaching things, successes, failures. We share on our blog a ton of information. We talk about what I mentioned earlier, doing the inclusive benefits audit. We just did like a pay equity audit. We reevaluated how we offer holidays and programming around holidays. Like, a ton of that information is on the site. And we talk about the early days and the mistakes that we made. I think that's equally as important to understand. What works for Holler isn't necessarily going to work for another company, but it is, I think, an interesting perspective to be able to see, what was successful and what wasn't. So yeah, I mean, we've been I think really the first thing we sat down is, before we even launched DibSource, is like, okay, what is our approach to diversity, inclusion and belonging and equity at Holler? What are the kind of principles that we want to live by, so that as we're rolling out, new ideas or new education opportunities, we're really checking them to those principles and making sure that that they match, that what we're doing is actually doing something for what we want to happen. So it's definitely still a work in progress. We're in the process right now of really creating different content beyond just blogs. Like, we want to do more audio and video recordings as well. And we just launched a section, which I'm really excited about, which is called Action. And it's really just a call to action for companies to share what are you doing with the talent that your company has to make an impact in this space. And we've one of the things that we did at Holler, we make stickers. I think most people are most familiar with them from Venmo.
Yeah.
So for Women's History Month, we made stickers for famous, or really should be famous, women in history, and they look like stamps. And then and it has the woman's face on it in black and white. And when the stamp peels up, which is the animation, underneath it says what they're famous for, or what their contribution was. And so this idea of like women putting their stamp on history, and there's some education behind that, right? So that was just like a very small example of how we used our talented team to try to, generate change here. So yeah, it's definitely a work in progress, but it's been a really exciting project. And I won't say that we have solved diversity, equity, and inclusion at Holler, but I do feel like our engagement survey is trending in that direction, which has been really exciting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love about what you shared as well is you're also thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion from a lens of the product internally with employees and then externally with your open source resources. I think it's really important to offer that information. But also, as you mentioned too, I think a lot of people are maybe weary to share mistakes, or just like not everybody knows everything. But I think it is important just as a learning process, and just thinking about what is best for the future as well. I know one of the things that we kind of discussed in our previous call as well was your equitable promotion process. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're approaching that?
Yeah, so we did this through a pay equity analysis. Like, I was like, I know that equal pay is a really important topic. I thought we were doing a good job of it. So we went through kind of this whole process of how we pay people, looking at market data, comparing that to the salary bands that we'd pulled together. We ended up making some changes as a result and adjusting some comp as a result as well. But once I did that, I was really like, okay, well, this is great. And it wasn't that hard to do for 60 people, but how do you do it for 200? How do you do it for 500? How do you do it for 3,000? And what are the things that a lot of what we talk about is like, what do we need to do today to be able to carry this culture that we've built into the next inflection point? And one of the big things about that was like, yes, we've done a good job of having an equitable company now, but how do we, like, what are the things that are going to happen in between now and 1,000 people that could change that? And a big part of that to me was the promotion process. So previously we had kind of like a promotion form that managers would go in and fill out some basic information, who the employee is, what their salary is, what the next role is, what the next salary is, why they should be promoted. And that was kind of that. It got submitted to me, I reviewed it, and I was like, okay, this seems fair, approved by our CEO, CFO, and like off to the races. And what I was realizing is, that doesn't really have any sort of checks and balances for if the promotion process is equitable. And what I mean by that is, were all the people who were eligible for that promotion evaluated? And if so, were they evaluated on the same metrics? So we really built out this much deeper, form, for lack of a better word, where we ask for feedback on things like examples of how this person has lived the values at Holler. The biggest contribution that this person has made to Holler in the last year. We look at things like, are they asking for peer feedback? Are they actioning that peer feedback? Are they attending the events that we offer them for learning and development? Are they using our learning and development software? So these are all things that we do consider, but it's not written out. And I wanted the team to be able to say, okay, if I'm getting promoted, this is how I'm going to be evaluated. And that's clear cut, and everyone can feel like they are being evaluated the same way. And then we took that kind of step two is for me or somebody in the people team, which right now is just me and one other person, to do kind of like a checks and balances. And so we're responsible then to say, okay, this person is being put up for promotion into this position, to look at the other people that are in that role and make sure, that why were they not evaluated for the position, or if we evaluated them against the same metrics, would they actually qualify for this role?
Right.
So really just like making sure to eliminate a lot of those potential unconscious biases that may exist. And so I'm excited to have rolled that out and see how it impacts the equitable promotions and growth within the company.
Yeah, absolutely. I know within the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of folks are talking about talent attraction, but I think the promotion, the retention piece is also super important. So it sounds like there's a lot of processes and, like you said, checks and balances happening at Holler to ensure that it's an equitable process, which is great. Are there any other kind of long-standing changes that you made during the pandemic that will supersede like the time that we're in right now, whether it's benefits, processes, or anything like that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is flexibility with remote working.
Yeah.
And I hope every company kind of leaves this pandemic with that lesson learned. I feel like it would be a real mistake about as we think about the future of the workplace, if we start with the pre-COVID idea. I think COVID has really proved that we can be successful in a distributed environment.
Right.
And so we'll absolutely be retaining a lot of the flexibility that we've gotten during this time. We haven't finalized what our return to work plan is, but that's been the biggest thing at the leadership level is like, we can't, we learned so much and we have to take those lessons with us and make sure that, the team is able to have a lot of the flexibility that they've, proven that they can handle.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'll be a big one.
I think that's something that we're hearing across the board as well in terms of flexible hybrid approach, remote first, and just more, inclusive design in terms of the work week as well, which I think is super interesting. Are there any other trends you're seeing within the communities that you're a part of in the people space that you think that companies and individuals need to be aware of to be successful in the future, aside from like the distributed workforce?
Yeah, I think what I've seen a lot of is a much larger shift to listening to the experiences of our employees. And I feel like that's more important now as we're hopefully nearing the end of the pandemic than
Right.
ever. Of course, like we just talked about, employees are hoping for more flexibility with remote working. Again, I think companies will have a very hard time retaining employees that don't jump on that bandwagon and kind of understand
Yeah.
the importance that that is. But also, like, when employees give feedback, taking it seriously. I've worked at companies before where you ask for feedback and then, the leadership would be upset with that feedback and they didn't want to listen to it. And
Right.
one thing that I've really learned is like, even if you disagree with the feedback that you're getting or the recommendations that are coming your way, there's a reason that they're there, and there's something to be said in that feedback. And I think taking it seriously is really important. I think one thing that I struggle with personally is that you can't please everyone. So, I feel like no matter how well thought out something may be, we really can't solve for every situation, but we can solve for the majority. And I think that's where a lot of the employee feedback is helpful. And I think, for any employees who are not in the HR space listening to this, like, give that feedback. Like, it's a data point and it's really helpful for us. And I'm hoping that if even in organizations where employees weren't as listened to before, this kind of shift will change that. And then, I think most importantly, of like the biggest trend that I'm seeing is in this, based on what we've experienced over the last year, is communication. Like,
Yeah.
we've really tried to not hide the why behind decisions that we've made, and we've tried to really like be open and honest with that, closing the loop by letting the company or the employee know how we approach the issue, what other ideas were considered, and how we plan to measure success. I think is like a really big thing that that this remote environment has made us have to do more of. And I think that's something that is a trend now, and taking that trend into the future is only going to make companies more successful and have much more engaged employees.
Exactly. Two-way communication, active employee listening, and really building that sense of trust. And I think that's definitely something that we're seeing across the board as well. How do you see that really culture of feedback that you're cultivating at Holler manifesting in the workplace? I know you touched on it a little bit, but really want to dive deeper into what's really important for employee listening, especially now in the new world of work that we're gonna dive into.
Yeah, I mean, I would say trust and feedback have been two of my top priorities in 2021. And I think that's, as a result of what I was just saying, this new remote environment that we've all now had a lot of time and ability to get used to. Um, you know, Knowing that we're not going back to an office as a company in this year, like we'll likely have a flexible workspace, but we don't have any. We won't ask employees to come back if they're not comfortable until early next year. We knew that since the beginning of this year. We've put a lot of like time and effort into this, and I think employee listening and feedback really starts with leadership. The entire leadership team has to be bought into creating a culture of trust, honesty, and feedback. Because if one person from that group deviates from it, it really will not work. So that's where we started. We said, this is what we want to do this year. We all got buy-in. We all talked about our concerns and just got on the same page. And one of the things that came out of that was we created a process around internal comms. And I know a lot of companies probably already have this, but at companies that I've worked with previously, it was one or two people's responsibility to build the comms around internal announcements or changes. And we agreed as a leadership team that we were going to do it together. So like I may build the base of it, but I challenge it with a leadership team. We, poke holes in it. Where might there be concerns that we're not
Yeah.
addressing? We talk about delivery methods, who delivers the message when, at what time it has to be done by, so that everybody's, and I think these rumor mills we've really been able to get rid of at Holler as a result. And I think they exist at every company, and when you have a distributed message, when a blanket email gets sent out that so and so left the organization, people are going to talk. So we've really like tried to get ahead of all of that, and we'll have our leaders, for example, sit down with their groups and say, this is what's happened, this is how it impacts you, this is how it impacts the rest of the organization, what questions do you have? And we really just get ahead of that. So yeah, and I think the other thing that I'll say with feedback, or I guess two other things. So hearing more from leadership, I think it has been a big tenet of how we're trying to build trust. Again, this remote work environment has really taken a lot of that ability to just like connect with leadership in one-off conversations or over lunch, that people don't have access to do. So I mentioned we did some recordings about the why behind a change. I did an interview with our CEO where I asked him questions about how he handled COVID, like what was going through his mind in those early days.
Mhm.
What does he wish he would have done differently? All of that. And then we interviewed our CMO, who is a mom of 2 young children, about what it was like being a working mom during the pandemic. Like, so I think getting our leadership on the level of other employees has been really helpful and has built a lot of like trust and understanding of who they are and where they come from and why they are the people that they are. And then the last thing I'll mention just on feedback is we just did this process where we called Ditch the Review, Not the Feedback. We had, and I think I mentioned this to you
Yeah.
before, but it's been a really exciting time for us to really, look in 2021 at what are the outdated things that we're doing that have just been, that are like administrative, that we just do it because everybody does it. And one of those things was the performance review. We had this really long, in-depth performance review process. A long self-review, peer reviews, manager reviews, like upward reviews, all of that. And it was just really time consuming. And so one thing that we did as we ditched the review is we put feedback in the employees' hands with some support from their managers. So now we don't have these in-depth, you have to get feedback, during these review processes necessarily. I'll send out reminders and say, we kind of gave like a feedback framework, like here's how you ask for feedback, here's how you give feedback. And then I'll send out random reminders, but it's really on the employees to ask their peers for the feedback that is going to be most impactful for them. So really trying to get away from like managers requesting feedback for their direct reports, and like you as the employee owning your feedback and saying, I know that this person can give me the most helpful feedback, so I'm going to ask them specifically for what I want feedback on. And so we just launched that recently, but people are really excited about it, and so far the feedback's been really good. The feedback on the feedback tool has been good.
Well, that's good. I like the idea of challenging, especially in a hyper kind of growth and creative environment as well, of just not doing things because that's the way we've always done it, or just like you said, administrative things, of just flipping something on its head as well, like the performance review, but you're still, the core of giving and receiving feedback is still there, and you have ownership. And it sounds like from a leadership perspective, there's definitely more of a team effort from a comms perspective as well. Shifting a little bit to, and this could be anything related to Holler or just the people space or anything you want to share as well, but what is something that keeps you up at night?
Oh, return to work.
Yeah,
return
it's a
to
big
work,
one.
return to work. Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned that, I've kind of alluded to this, but I think we're on version 11 or 12 of a framework
Wow.
of getting back to the office at this point, or back to a social working environment in whatever
Yeah.
capacity that looks like. We really just want to get it right, and we want to show our employees that we're listening, that we trust them, while also having some level of in-person collaboration and team building. Just think it's and I speak for the rest of my leadership team, like it's so important that we have a company culture. And while it's not impossible, it's hands down, without a doubt, much harder to build remotely
Yeah.
and really sustain remotely, especially with the growth that we're expecting. So that's been something that feels like it's just on constant rotation of discussion, and I know we'll get there. And I think it's good that we're challenging it, and challenging all of the different approaches to it. And I'm glad that other companies are going before us, so hopefully we can learn from them. But yeah, safe to say that is the number one thing that is keeping me up.
Wow, 12 drafts of return
Yeah.
to work is definitely a lot, but I think that's definitely good, because as more information is coming out and you're getting more feedback from employees, it sounds like that it's a super dynamic strategy, and it's always changing to make it better for everyone as well. But it's a big conversation that's happening right now, which definitely makes sense. I know that we talked about a couple different topics today, but is there anything else as a final question that you want to share with our listeners, or a point you really want to emphasize to ensure that they have it as a key takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, I think this post-COVID era is really providing such a big opportunity for people leaders to really reimagine the way things were and bring the people function into the now, is what I've been saying internally. We've learned that in office, out of office, at home, whatever that looks like, the show goes on. And I hope that leadership teams everywhere really take that lesson with them. And not just for remote working, but other aspects of the org, like trust and feedback and all of this is important. And I think we've learned a lot in the COVID era, but I think those are things that we should really carry forward. I'd love to see people ops leaders giving people the resources to do it yourself and do it on your own terms. I think that's kind of where we're going. And, while we're still early in our launch of the new performance review process or lack thereof that I mentioned, I feel like that's something that puts the employees in the driver's seat to give feedback that they need from those that are most equipped to give them feedback. And I think that's just one lesson that we've kind of learned over this period, is that employees do want to be successful. They will be in the driver's seat of their careers if you have the right people in those seats. And so giving them, not only flexibility with return to work, but flexibility on how they work and how they get feedback and how they grow. I think everybody has really earned that over the last year and a half. And I hope that that's something that is something that we just see consistently in the people org and internally at companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think more ownership over one's career and just one's feedback as well is super important. And again, to your point earlier, we've proven that people are self-motivated to work from their homes through this remote world. So that definitely makes sense. Brittany, thank you so much for coming on Reimagining Company Culture. It was so great speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm always love to talk about this stuff. So I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, of course. I can definitely tell that you enjoy your job and being super creative and thinking about employee engagement and people strategies. And as a reminder, here at AllVoices, we believe in the power of all employees to speak up at an organization and think that it's a requirement in order for everyone to succeed. We'll speak soon.